Growing up, I had a cousin who talked to trees like they were old friends, who named every stray cat in the neighborhood, who could turn a walk to the mailbox into an epic quest involving imaginary kingdoms and tragic heroines. She collected words like other kids collected baseball cards, hoarding beautiful phrases in a battered notebook she carried everywhere. Mellifluous, she'd whisper herself, rolling the syllables around her mouth like candy. Serendipity, gossamer. Adults called her imaginative when they were being kind, difficult when they weren't. But I knew she was something else entirely. She was someone who refused to let the world be ordinary. When I first met Anne Shirley on the page of Montgomery's Anne of Green Gables, I felt a shock of recognition so sharp it nearly stopped my heart. Here was my cousin, transplanted to Prince Edward Island in 1908, still talking to trees, still refusing to accept that life had to be beige when it could be crimson. Anne Shirley arrives at Green Gables like a force of nature disguised an 11-year-old orphan, all sharp elbows and sharper imaginations. She's supposed to be a boy. Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert had requested a sturdy lad to help with farm work. But what they got was a red-headed hurricane who talks to flowers and sees poetry in potato fields. In our age of prescribed childhood development and structured playdates, Anne feels like a refugee from a wilder time, when kids were allowed to spend entire afternoons constructing elaborate fantasies in the woods without anyone worrying about their screen time or social media presence. But here's what makes Anne revolutionary rather than merely quaint. She's the first literary character who understands that imagination isn't escapism, it's survival. Anne had spent her first 11 years shuttled between families who saw her as free labor, enduring neglect and abuse that would break most children. Instead of becoming bitter or broken, she's weaponized wonder, transforming every disappointment into an adventure, every rejection into a setup for a better story. She's every kid who's ever been told they're too much, too loud, too weird, too intense, and decide that being too much is infinitely better than being not enough. Montgomery's genius lies in how she never patronizes Anne's internal world. When Anne rechristens Barry's Pond as the Lake of Shining Waters, or decides that the Avenue of Apple Trees is the White Way of Delight, Montgomery doesn't present these as childish flights of fancy. She shows them as acts of creative rebellion against a world determined to drain the magic out of everything. Anne's performing the same alchemy that every artist learns, taking the raw material of reality and transforming it into something bearable, beautiful, meaningful. The relationship between Anne and Marilla Cuthbert cuts straight to the heart of what it means to be seen and chosen by someone who has every reason to reject you. Marilla is everything Anne is not: practical, reserved, suspicious of beauty for its own sake. But she recognizes something in the strange, chattering child she can't quite name. Watching Marilla slowly soften, watching her learn to speak Anne's language of extravagant emotion and purple prose, feels like witnessing a miracle in real time. In our era of chosen families and found communities, the bond reads like prophecy. Sometimes the people who love us best are the ones who have to learn how to love us at all. What makes Anne's story particularly resonant now is how she navigates the brutal social ecosystem of school, where being different is a crime punishable by isolation. Every kid who's ever been mocked for their interests, their appearance, their way of seeing the world, will recognize Anne's daily gauntlet of classroom humiliations. When Gilbert Blythe calls her carrots, when she breaks a slate over his head in response, when she spends the next 5 years nursing a grudge that's really just wounded pride dressed up as righteous anger, this is the stuff of middle school trauma, elevated to the level of epic poetry. Montgomery understood something that our culture of toxic positivity often forgets, that fierce emotions aren't character flaws to be managed, but forces of nature to be honored. Anne doesn't just get angry. She experiences rage as a full-body event that transforms her into something approaching the sublime. She doesn't feel sad. She mourns with the intensity of a Shakespearean heroine. In our age of emotional regulation and mindfulness apps, Anne's unfiltered intensity feels both terrifying and liberating. The book's most devastating moments aren't the dramatic disasters, Anne dyeing her hair green, accidentally getting Dana drunk on currant wine, falling off the roof while pretending to be Elaine of Astolat, but the quiet scenes, where Anne confronts the possibility she might be ordinary after all. When she realizes that her stories aren't as brilliant as she thought, when she discovers that talent and effort don't always guarantee success, when she faces the possibility that growing up might mean giving up the very things that make her who she is. These moments hit like physical blows because they represent every dreamer's worst fear, that the world might be right about us after all. Reading Anne of Green Gables in 2025 feels like finding a message in a bottle from a time when childhood was allowed to be both magical and messy. Anne represents everything our culture claims to value: creativity, authenticity, resilience, but struggles to actually nurture. She's every gifted child who's been pathologized for their intensity, every weird girl who's been medicated into normalcy, every dreamer who's been told that imagination is a luxury they can't afford. But more than that, Anne's a reminder that the choice between being ordinary and being extraordinary isn't really a choice at all. It's a daily practice of refusing to let the world convince you that wonder is childish, that beauty is frivolous, that the stories we tell ourselves about who we are don't matter. Anne Shirley doesn't just survive her circumstances, she transforms them through the sheer force of refusal to accept life has to be anything less than extraordinary. Montgomery didn't just write a children's book, he created a manual for anyone who's ever felt like they were born into the wrong world, a love letter to every person who's ever been told that they're too much and decided that too much is exactly enough. Anne of Green Gables isn't just a story about an orphan finding a home. It's about the radical act of insisting you deserve a world as big and beautiful as your imagination can make it.